Hey everybody, Nick Kypreos here for the Real Kyper at Noon show. I hope everyone's doing well. I hope everybody enjoyed their day yesterday as much as the Tampa Bay Lightning, 2020 Stanley Cup champions, on what was a boat parade. Something new that we haven't seen in the past. I had the Canyon of Heroes, of course, in New York City, and not quite the Canyon of Heroes, but it was actually pretty good. Not not New York like with veterans and astronauts and heads of state and of course champions out of New York City, but the players looked like they were having fun. Maybe too much fun. I think Lord Stanley. I hope Lord Stanley didn't wake up today with a fever or a cough or shortness of breath because we are talking about the state of Florida here. And I don't blame the players at all, okay? And I'm one of them. And in a moment, we're going to have Brian Lawton. And of course, we know Brian Lawton as an agent and a vice president and general manager of an NHL hockey club and a super smart guy. But he was a player too, and I think he'll back me up on that. We're idiots. You give us an inch, we'll take a mile. You want to give us the Stanley Cup and go and party in a pandemic, we're going to do it. Okay? No questions asked. And I would have been the same guy on that boat. But when I'm watching Floridians playing tonsil hockey with the Stanley Cup, I got to ask, where are the adults in the room? Please tell me at some point somebody would sit there and go, we just spent anywhere between $75 and $90 million and 40,000 tests every day on these guys to keep this virus out. And within 48 hours of the door shutting in Edmonton, we released the Stanley Cup to have a bunch of strangers putting their lips all over the cup. Like I said, we're idiots. We don't care. We want to party. Those players waited their whole lives for that moment. From their most earliest memories as a kid, they all fantasize what it would be like to party with the Stanley Cup. And they did it. But no one was there, I believe, to at least, make some interesting decisions that could possibly keep them from getting sick. And I hope and I pray none of them do. And all they'll have for it are great memories. But am I the only one that found that strange a little bit? All right, let's bring in Brian Lawton here, a regular contributor on Real Kyper at Noon. And I think, Brian, you're the perfect guy on a day like this because we got so much to get into. And of course, every day that we get closer to the draft, there's more intriguing stories out there. More we get closer to unrestricted free agency, which is Friday, the stories will start getting bigger and bigger, and we're going to get into a lot of them with Brian Lawton in the next little while here. But maybe we can start, Brian, just talking a little bit about the Tampa Bay Lightning, because we give Stevie Yzerman full credit because he was there for 8 years and his fingerprints are all over this championship. But you've got a fingerprint or two still on this cup as well from your time in 2008, 2009, when you were a part of Tampa Bay. So let's just start there first in terms of what you were able to see and feel watching Tampa Bay in 2020 lift the Stanley Cup.
Wow. Hey, thanks for saying that, Kyper. But it was a long time ago. Yes, of course, I was there when we drafted Stamkos. But Jay Feaster really deserves the credit for that. Just for clarity, I was hired 4 days before that draft, and Jay ran it. He knew exactly who he wanted, and he took Stamkos. Jay would leave the organization about a week or 10 days later. But he deserves credit for that. Victor Hedman, yeah, sure. We drafted Victor Hedman. That was a little bit unique, Kipper. I don't talk about it much, but we actually had a little bit of a discrepancy amongst our staff on who to take. And at the end of the day, we had come up with as a group that we would select Matt Duchene second. However, when you're the general manager and the buck stops with you, and I recognize this for other roles I've had in business, and I fully took that responsibility. It was on me who we picked with that first pick. And I had decided not to let anybody know until we got to the draft who we were going to take. I participated in all the meetings. I loved the due diligence that we did. I loved the work that our scouting staff did. I didn't agree with the final conclusion. And ultimately, that is on me. So I informed ownership of where we were at as a club in terms of our kind of group list. And I told them that we were not going to take Matt first, although I thought he would be a great player, and he has been a great player. But I felt like Victor was our guy. And they said, hey, it's on you. You're the GM. Go ahead. If that's what you think, that's your call. Oren Koulis was great about it. I went back and met with the staff at the draft and informed them that our list was going to change.
I can't even imagine.
Why would I do that, Kipper? Because as I said,
the
GM is not going to weigh in on all the draft selections when you're at the draft table. You may look down there, fans, and see a GM sitting at the head of the table, but the reality is when you're managing your own club and you're traveling with them every day, it doesn't matter. I put a ton of due diligence into the drafts. But you still can't really make the decision after maybe one or two players. In the top five, I felt that I had to weigh in on it heavily and ultimately make that call.
Man, I can't even imagine what it would have looked like if you guys went with Duchene.
You know what, Kipper? We had the second worst record that year. They had the first worst record when I got hired. You know, Tampa was in a different state, obviously, back then as a club, not what we see in the final finished product today. But we were dead last. Then the following year, we finished second to last. We go to the lottery. I did not go. One of our ownership members went. Actually, Dave Andrechuk went, excuse me. And we didn't win the lottery. We stayed right where we were. Different draft lottery rules. I can remember watching it live and saying to myself, that worked out beautifully for us. And the reason is that I felt confidently. Gar Snow, a guy that I went to high school with, of all things, was managing the New York Islanders at the time. They had the first pick. I felt very confidently, and rightly so, that Garth would take John Tavares. We were going to get the guy that I wanted, the guy that I believed was second, although we hadn't finished our list yet. But I never, ever, ever had one moment of anxiety about not winning the lottery. I never went home and said, God, it would have been great if we picked the lottery. And the reason was I had small concern with John Tavares and his skating. John was so professional. We did some very unusual things that year. We brought all three of these kids down to Tampa. That's not that unusual. All the clubs back then were interviewing the top guys if you were in the top 10. But what we did was different, was we brought them all down together. Same flight. Come on down, guys. I want to see you three interact. It wasn't a contest or a competition. It was just to have the ability to kind of line everybody right up next to each other. They did all the testing on ice, not on ice, but in the gym and psychological. And we had dinners. I remember we had one incredible dinner one night with Oren Koulis, just the three players, Oren and myself. Very wonderful Italian restaurant. One rule, no talking about hockey. And we probably learned more about all the kids in that dinner than we did any other time. Ultimately, my conclusions were that Matt was from Halliburton, is from Halliburton. His parents were real estate professionals up there doing very well, a little bit of a small town. The other two kids, John Tavares, TSN superstar, World Junior superstar by then, known all over the North America, Canada, United States by National Hockey League fans. Victor Hedman, same thing, playing in men's league in Sweden. But they were just much more advanced than Matt emotionally. And that meant something to me. It wasn't everything, but it meant something. So that whole experience, when I look back on it, it was never really going to be anybody but Victor Hedman. I was very, very privately pleased that I didn't have to make the decision between who to take first. I just thought it worked out perfectly for us. That's what really happened there. You don't always hear this stuff, the fans. Our staff did an amazing job. After the draft, there was a person on the staff that wasn't very happy with my decision. He really felt strongly that I was making a mistake.
Nobody's complaining about that decision many years later.
Not now, but that person was very upset.
Now.
After the draft, he came up to me and he said, this is a quote, he said, "Brian, the Colorado Avalanche are laughing at us." That was the night of the draft, which was in the morning.
Yeah.
I just looked at him and I kind of thought he was joking at first, and then I realized he wasn't. And I said, "You know what, dude, let it breathe a little bit. We just had the draft this morning." Nobody's played a game yet. Now, to be fair, to roll that forward. Roll it forward, though, Kyper. And in the first year, Matt Duchene was amazing.
Yes.
He had a better year than Victor Hedman did. It never bothered me. We were looking at Victor over the next 15 years and what he would develop into. And all the credit does go to Steve Yzerman, their staff, their players. It doesn't go to any of us. Yes, we did what we're supposed to do, but those guys went on and really developed him. A lot of coaches went into that. And it worked out fantastic for them, and I am very, very happy for them and for Jeff and Nick.
I think
everybody in that organization.
I think too, lots. Just physically, you could see the potential in all three of them. There's no question. But I'm just wondering what you saw at the age of 18 mentally when it comes to Hedman, because I found it really interesting when Stamkos said he's our captain now. When I'm not here. And we saw it, just the presence, and just while he waits for every player to leave the ice, he turned himself into a general for Tampa Bay. And did you ever see signs of that he would be such a great leader? Because the tendency is those guys are quiet, or they're not guys that suck a lot of oxygen out of a room. And I'm talking about the Swedes in general. And I love every Swede I played for. Man, they're just great people, great team guys, enjoy life, never having a bad day. But Hedman, to me, he turned into this guy that just had total control of the room.
No, absolutely, Kyper. And as a young player, you could see that he had the foundation of this. But even Mark Messier had to go through a process of developing into the guy that he is now. There were a lot of people that affected Victor. Certainly, in my experience, he was coming off playing in Sweden, where Mattias Timander, a good pro, played for the Boston Bruins, real honest player, was a huge mentor for him. When he came to Tampa, people may recall, we signed a guy by the name of Matthias Olin, as good a pro as you will ever meet. His job was to mentor Victor. I think he did an incredible job. You could see where he could end up, but a million things can go wrong for young players. I credit Victor for taking the steps, developing into the guy he is today. He actually was a little bit shy about his abilities when he was a rookie. There were times where I would sit down with him and just say, "Victor, you got so much potential, so much more to give." I used an example one time where he got scored on in Buffalo. Guy comes down, walks him, gives him the inside out whoop-de-woo, goes right around him, scores. It's a terrible play for him. It's something he was incredibly embarrassed by. He got completely walked, and they ended up scoring. On the next face-off, Rick Tocchet was coaching then, leaves him out. Puck comes back to him. He goes end to end and scores. We were sitting up there going, "What was that?"
Yeah.
Oh my God. In a good way. This guy could do that every game. So then you're into the discussion, why doesn't he?
Yeah.
Because he's a rock solid human being. He's feeling his way with his new teammates. He's watching, he's listening, he's learning, he's respectful, all the things that you need to be a great leader. Add it all up in the end, and that's what you see today. You see a guy that always had it in him, but had to go to a process to get there. And it was a really fun thing for me to watch, just as a hockey fan, though. And I'm sure it was a really fun event for his coaches, teammates, manager, Julien Brisebois, you name it. I'm sure that they're pretty happy to have Victor Hedman on that team. And for him to be the MVP, well, that was just icing on the cake. Stamkos and Victor, essentially the same guy. Stammer's a little bit more extroverted than Victor is, though.
Well, that process led to a Stanley Cup, lots, and a boat parade. What did you think of that? I think you caught my take early on it.
Yes, and you did a great job. You know, hey, look, is it ideal? Is it optimal in the strangest of times? What we saw on camera down in Tampa last night? Yeah. No, it isn't. Am I surprised? Am I shocked? Am I disappointed? No. How much work goes into it? You've been there. You've climbed the mountain. You've been at that parade. It might have been on Broadway back then. Yeah. Not on the Hillsborough River on boats. But hey, I support these guys 100%.
Yeah, and I do too. And let's just hope everybody remains safe moving forward.
Yeah.
And we don't have to talk much more about it. Lots. Okay. So let's move on, because, you know, our thumbnail was leading towards the draft, and we know that's coming up Tuesday and Wednesday, and we're going to be here next week as well, talking a lot about the draft and unrestricted free agency. One of them that we talked about as well were the New York Rangers with their first pick overall. There's no question who the number one pick is going to be, Lots. But I got to imagine that the Rangers would be listening to a lot of things. And the other day we talked about Jack Eichel, and that whole thing came rather quickly. I had talked about Jack Eichel and hearing the rumblings that he wasn't happy and that perhaps a change in scenery he wouldn't mind. And that was about 4 or 5 weeks ago on this show. And then sure enough, Bob McKenzie brought it up again. And I don't think those type of talks are going to go away anytime soon. First of all, is there a tie between that first overall pick and maybe some of the discussions with the Buffalo Sabres?
You'd have to think so. I looked at that after it came out, and I think it's a very good idea from the New York Rangers perspective. You could see why they'd want, and I have a little bit of experience of considering at least moving in, a number one centerman, an elite player. In Jack's case, at his age, with what he's doing, I love Alexis Lafrenière. Make no mistake. I think he's going to be incredible. But you said it to me in a conversation that we had a few days ago, just that, but he's a winger.
He's a winger.
How many wingers?
And he's not a centerman.
Yes. And yeah, sure, you said Ovechkin, obviously. That's the top mark you can get as a winger. Panarin's pretty darn good, just for the record. But they still will not impact the game as much as a center. When you add in that Jack Eichel, he's going to be good for the next 12 to 15 years, Kyper. I don't know how you even balance that trade out if you're Buffalo. I don't see him doing it in the end because of that. If you want to cut salary, yes, you can do that. You get a much cheaper Lafrenière. But there's no way that you can talk yourself into that being a good idea if you're the Buffalo Sabres. It just isn't. I thought about it. I had conversations about it with Vinny Lecavalier when I was in Tampa. We were hurting financially. It's no secret that Florida was one of the hardest hit communities economically, states economically in the country. And that's not unusual. It was the best when times were good, and it was the worst when times were bad. So we considered it. But it was a different scenario. Vinny was 3 years older, almost 4, than Jack Eichel. The game had changed to a point where the internal evaluation from myself was it was getting harder as the game got quicker.
Well,
there were a lot of reasons behind that.
I think lots. You're the perfect guy to talk about maybe Kevin Adams and the dilemma that he has in even contemplating moving the face of his franchise. And you mentioned Vinny Lecavalier, and Vinny was a little older, but both of them were star players and are star players right now for Jack Eichel. Both of them have huge contracts, and I think just prior to you getting in Tampa Bay, I think Lecavalier had already agreed to or had his 80, $90 million contract done. Was it done, Lots? Did you finish that deal?
No, he never signed it, but it was agreed to. And I remember it like it was yesterday because Len Berry really was responsible for that contract. Len had gone and met with the agents and talked about, this is what we're going to do. We can't do it yet till July 1st, but once we get there, we want to sign you long term. We want you to be a Lightning for life. There was a couple caveats with that deal. Number one, player that didn't have a no trade, no move, it wouldn't kick in until the deal started. He still had a year left on his contract, so there really wasn't any hurry to get it done. Ended up on my desk after I was hired, and I was told, okay, go paper this deal. I said, what's the deal? Len gave it to me on like a napkin. And I was like, is this really it? Like, yeah, that's it. Go get it done. I called up eventually Kent and Vinny and said, okay, guys, I want to talk about this. And I'm not very pleased about it. It was ridiculously long. It was a ton of money. Vinny deserved it. But it was just structured in such a way that it was really prohibitive. And I told them in that initial conversation, do you not like it here in Tampa? Because I've seen our book since I've been here, and you're going to force yourself out of this team. Well, of course, they told me to go F myself. Why are you trying to screw this up? We already agreed with Len. This is what Len said you would do. So eventually I talked him into changing it, softening it, lengthening it to make the cap hit lower, because I felt that we would not ever be able to move that contract if we had to in the way it was. And lo and behold, we did struggle financially, and we did want to move it not many months later. And let me tell you what, Ken Hughes, he was ready to blow a gasket. They didn't like the idea. So that was the genesis of what went on there with Vinny Lecavalier. I could tell you that the deal that we were getting back, people always say that's incredible.
So let me just interrupt you for 2 seconds so I can kind of paint this picture, because I find this story fascinating, and I'm sure a lot of listeners and followers are as well. Just in terms of now introducing a scenario with a trade, do you shop Vinny Lecavalier around, or do you just go straight to the Montreal Canadiens and say, hey, I've got your French-Canadian superstar here, let's make a deal?
Drifted the possibility, never said I would do it, but absolutely drifted the possibility that to every team that I felt could do it. Not every team could do it for some of the same reasons as us at that time. But everybody that you could logically come up with, it was discussed with. And almost every time the conversation would quickly flip to, what about that Stamkos guy? And I would say, no, that's a non-starter. Don't bring that up. I'm not even talking about that. That guy's not getting traded. Internally, our review analysis was that was the future of the Lightning at the time. 100%. We had those conversations many times. I would say, that little 91 skating around, that's the future of the team. So in any event, there was no interest from anybody except for one club, and that was Montreal. And nobody could stomach the contract, quite frankly. It wasn't because Vinny wasn't a great player. He was. But the contract was prohibitive. It was one of those times where you got such a great contract that it's not so great for you in the end. Could force you to move. So we went through the process. Ultimately, I was not permitted to make a trade I wanted to. It would have been very poor.
Don't stop there. We want to know, first of all, Bob Gainey, correct, in Montreal?
Yes, Bob was the GM. Bob was very upset at me for years because one of the members of the ownership, and it wasn't Orkulis, I won't get into it, but did not want the club to make that move. He was opposed to it. And the way it works in hockey operations departments varies from team to team, but in our particular case, it was something where both people had to agree to it, to trade a player of that ilk. So there was one person that stopped it, and I won't even say it because it still upsets me to this day. But
okay,
regardless,
we'll respect that. We'll respect that.
Yeah. Regardless, the trade, it would have been, for a new GM, it would have been hard to absorb. I felt, as most people that know me, I'll listen to everybody. I'll do my due diligence. But when I make a decision, I'll be confident in it and I'll live by it.
So what kind of pieces out of Montreal were you looking for?
Players that ended up being star players in the league. Subban, Pacioretty, Price. We had another player we were considering putting in the deal that they wanted.
Did you guys come up with a deal at the very end? Did you have an agreement on a deal before it got nixed?
I never told Bob I would do it. I had to go through ownership, but we had the structure of a deal in place that we both agreed to.
Can you?
And
was it PK?
Before, PK would have been a guy that was included in that. Yes.
You guys would have ended up with PK Subban in Tampa. That would have been interesting.
Yeah, PK would have been there, and Bob was really good about it. He just said, "Look, none of these players were known. This looks like a home run when you talk about it today. You have to think then. I was fully aware of this. This was going to look terrible right on the onset. I didn't really care about that. I was more interested in how could we build a great team for the future. We needed to conserve, our capital and live to fight another day. So we were going to reduce, millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars off of payroll. We were going to build a future, and then we were going to work through that as an organization. That's the way I laid it out to ownership. That's what I wanted to do. That's what I thought was best. I was very in tune as a general manager with how we were doing financially. I have interest in that stuff. I could read the tea leaves.
So with those words that you just uttered out of your mouth, is that not the exact scenario that Kevin Adams right now is going through in Buffalo? Could he not shed tens of millions of dollars? And I'm hearing money is an issue in Buffalo. Lots. I don't know what you're hearing, but in that aspect, that's exactly what Kevin Adams needs to assess too with Jack Eichel.
I find it hard to believe that money would be an issue, and yet, I don't know. I mean, I look at Terry Pagula, a guy that
listen. I don't know. Let me just say, Lots. When I say money is an issue, I keep hearing that the Pagulas would like money shed from their payroll here.
It's certainly anybody's right, but I can't, I do my due diligence on everybody, just for television. And, Terry sold his businesses at a real peak. Fracking is really down right now, and people associate him with fracking. He sold all that. Guy made a ton of money. Now, he owns the Buffalo Bills. They got yachts being built. You hear all these different things. You do your due diligence. Who knows? But I will just make the main point here, Kipper. It is not the same. My analysis was that Vinny, as great as he was past his peak, and he would now start to regress, and the rest of the equation worked with us. We were taking a tremendous amount of risk. Yeah, we look like superheroes now because the players ended up being all-stars that we had identified. But it would have looked terrible at that time to trade your star player. I knew that. I really didn't care. That's my personality. It is what it is. If you want to be in this business, it's a tough business. You got to do what you think is right and take your best shot. That was my best shot. But it was not lost on me that we were going to take a lot of grief, but I felt like in the end we would be right. Whether or not you could make it to the end as a GM, that's another story. I didn't care about that. My business experiences were, I used to have a saying that, look, if you don't want my advice, then keep your money and I'll keep my advice. Like, I just looked at the world that way. You got to have conviction in what you're doing, even when you're wrong. And I was wrong lots of times, but the more you do it, the more right you are. And when you have conviction and passion, it's just a matter of working through the process. I felt really, really good about doing that back then. And yes, we would have looked very, very smart. It didn't work out. It's a shame, but it didn't work out. And in the end, for the Tampa Bay Lightning, Vinny stayed there, and he certainly played well. He was a good player. Eventually got bought out, obviously, but that was years later. And it is what it is.
So the appeal for the New York Rangers with Eichel would be that he isn't Vinny Lecavalier with possibly 1, 2, or 3 years ahead. He's got 10, 12 years ahead. He's still very young, and he is a natural centerman, and there is an association between their head coach and Eichel, and people want to connect those dots.
If the Rangers could do it, and even if they had to include Kaapo Kakko, first pick, second pick last year, throw in Lundstrom, who I think is a pretty good defender they have. Essentially, you're recreating something similar. It still wouldn't work out for the Buffalo Sabres, in my opinion. No. And it would be a tremendous move for the New York Rangers because, just in my analysis, there is a lot more certainty. Like you just said, you're going to get Jack Eichel for pick a number of years, 8, 10, 12, as a legitimate number one center, which is one of the more difficult things to acquire, if not the most difficult in the National Hockey League. Joe Thornton is the last real guy I can think of that moved like that. And it seems to have worked out pretty good for the San Jose Sharks. Boston went a different route then. I think they got a first rounder, but I think it was Wayne Primo, Marco Sturm, good players, but not of Joe Thornton's ilk. It's not a trade. I would want to be, if I could pick a side, I would want to be on the Rangers side of that trade if it ever happened. I don't see it happening. I can't see Buffalo doing that. No matter what the mandate is, Kevin Adams, he has to have the gumption to stand up and say, I'm your general manager. You're asking me to watch out for the future of this franchise. This is not in our best interest. I think you could get fired for something like that.
Oh,
but if you
goodness.
Yes. If you can't do it, Kipper, you shouldn't be managing the club.
Oh, no, that's big cojones right there. This isn't trading for Stahl, man. This is one that you will wear the rest of your life. Yeah. Those trades can come and go, and they're forgotten in a few years. This one would be something that could make or break Kevin Adams for the next 40 years in the game of hockey. So I would be careful if I was Kevin as well. Nick Kypreos here with former general manager of the Tampa Bay Lightning, Brian Lawton, and now current analyst on the NHL Network. Please leave your comments for us. We'll try to get to a few. Hit the like button for lots, not just Doug MacLean, but lots too. And a rating and review.
Come on, I have to get more likes than Doug MacLean.
Hey, and tell us on a rating and review for Apple Podcasts how much you love Lots more than Doug MacLean as well. Lots, what we don't usually see during the draft is one team hold 2 spots in the top 5, and that's also the Ottawa Senators. Yeah. And while we're at it, talking about the first pick overall and the Rangers, whether or not they find any takers who want to maybe overspend a little bit. If you're the Ottawa Senators, and I know this has kind of been bannered about in the past, but I really believe that it could get revisited before Tuesday. Is there any way that the Ottawa Senators convince the New York Rangers that they want that first pick, and therefore be in a situation where they can sweeten the pot for them with a player or two, and still get the Rangers their number one centerman through the draft, i.e., Byfield or Stützle?
It's certainly possible. That would be a really gutsy move, and one I don't feel there's enough of a clear-cut advantage. It could go either. I really like Alexis Lafrenière. Don't get me wrong. This guy's got some. I'm not going to say he plays like Alex Ovechkin, he just has some high-end results that he'll be able to get. His motor is always running. He just plays at such a high level, makes big plays. I know he's a winger. We've already talked about that, but I'm pretty high on him. I have him demonstrably higher than the next guy at this time. But that would be a really, really gutsy call by the New York.
Can I intrigue you if I'm the New York Rangers if I give you Brady Tkachuk in the deal? Is that a game changer?
That would be a game changer for me. That would, no doubt about it. If the Ottawa Senators,
I don't want to give up Brady. I don't want to give up Brady Tkachuk if I'm the Ottawa Senators, but I am talking about a franchise type of name that can instantly put asses in the seats, sell season tickets, and I like it when I can take Lafrenière over to Montreal and go in and play the Canadiens with that guy. It's a game changer if they get him.
Yeah, no, it would be. And again, this is the uniqueness of, this is where Jeff Gorton obviously is going to be heavily involved. Jeff's got a heavy background in scouting also. He'd have to see somebody a little bit lower down the totem pole in the draft in that 3 to 5 range that he feels great about. Brady Tkachuk is a known commodity. You could come to a pretty good consensus on that. So if he substituted, in theory, one of those picks, and you still got one of the other ones, I'd have to think the New York Rangers would think about that.
Byfield and Tkachuk for the first pick overall. Now it's shaping up.
Yeah. Now the hair's standing on the back of the neck for people in that one.
Yeah.
No doubt about it.
And I know some people are sitting there going, I'm not giving away Brady Tkachuk. I love that guy. He's like his brother. He could be a franchise player. The only thing you got to remember is that the Tkachuk family wasn't that thrilled about being drafted by Ottawa. And, whether or not you can have this guy for the next 10 years is really on what they see through ownership lots. And that's another thing too, that you can eventually bridge Brady Tkachuk with a couple of deals. But if he and that family don't see a light at the end of the tunnel with an ownership that could really, really build a championship, I got to think Brady Tkachuk's going to run the first chance he gets.
It's certainly a possibility. I mean, the way the rules are structured now, everybody knows and understands what they are. You've got 7 years with these kids that start at Brady's age, and then they can become unrestricted.
And you're on the clock.
And they can absolutely dictate that. He can say, I'll just do 1-year deals if I have to. I'm not staying. But when you have 7 years, I don't care what city you're in. If you can't convince a guy to buy in what you're selling as an organization, then shame on you. I think it's too early to make that call for Ottawa. I think their best days are ahead of them. It wouldn't scare me if I were Pierre Dorion. I'd be thinking exactly what I just said. Look, come on, if we can't convince this guy within that much time, then we got to rethink how we're doing business, because it's not going right. Now, it hasn't gone great. Everybody knows that. Ottawa's going through a massive rebuild. In some ways, it hasn't been handled maybe publicly as eloquently or beautifully as you'd like. Mr. Melnyk is very involved in the team. We've seen that. But in terms of the end results, I think they're going to do pretty well, Kyper. That's a lot of picks. They have any luck at all, the Ottawa Senators are going to be a really good team. And ultimately, you always want to handle your business perfectly from a public standpoint, from a public perception. But ultimately, people care most about, are you going to win? Are you a winning organization? I think they'll get there. I really do. It just hasn't looked maybe as beautiful as you'd like to on the way to
there is, for the Ottawa Senator fan, there's still that perception that Eugene Melnyk's going to screw this up.
Hey, honestly, I have
that's the worry. That's the worry.
Yeah. Yes. Noise to a general manager, any noise around your club that is out of your control, you hate that. You hate that. You don't want it. It's also a new world. Most of the ownership groups are, they've been changing over in the National Hockey League. You're seeing people more involved than ever. I don't get it personally, Kipper, because you got so many smart business people that are owning these teams. You need to invite them in and include them more, not less. It used to be a lot less when we were players. Ownership was smoke a cigar in a boardroom and talk about this incredible asset that you have that's very public facing. Nowadays, you got younger people more interested in the business, want to know more. I say if you're a GM now, don't shun them. Invite them in. Show them how much work it is. Show them how complex a team has become. I think you'll earn more points that way than you will trying to hold them at arm's length.
It's funny you say that because, you hear stories within our inner circle and, the process with the Arizona Coyotes and their interview process. And we got credible hockey people that are intrigued with that job. They know the challenges lots of going in there. But the interview process was really, I heard the CEO and the owner's son, who's 20-something, lots, conducting basically the interview. And I had one candidate basically tell me that it was almost like talking to a guy who was asking questions because he was getting ready for a fantasy draft.
Right.
Like
honestly,
the questions lots in an NHL general manager interview was, okay, what can we get for this guy? And what do you think he's worth? And can we get Sidney Crosby for this guy? And it's like, okay, where's the door? Get me out of here.
I can't speak to that. I know Javier Gutierrez. My wife owns a tech company, and Arizona's a club we're speaking to about that. And I think he's an awesome guy. He's exactly the type of guy that hockey needs. Now, he's the president of the organization. I never spoke to that team about their GM job in complete transparency. But boy, I like Javier. Boy, I like the way he talks and the way he presents himself. So I don't know. Is that true? Honestly, I honestly don't know. I can't comment. I hope it's a challenge,
though. Whether or not we're talking about Arizona or any other team, there is a new challenge to go and now speak to people that probably aren't well versed with the business. Let's just say that.
Yeah.
Okay. We can talk about culture. We can talk about other things, but as far as the business side, it is a challenge now to kind of talk to these people, and you don't want to talk down to them in an interview. You don't want to embarrass anybody, but it's getting harder.
It's definitely getting harder. I can tell you that the most frustration for me, having talked with a number of teams, and some of them even recent, not Florida or Arizona, but other teams. The number one takeaway I always have, and it's concerning, but you have to look past it, is that a lot of times you will be interviewed by people that really don't know what to ask you. They don't, but they're gifted people in terms of they've obviously got to a position in life because of their business skills. And it'll be more like a business interview. I think some of that is good. Where it goes sideways is a professional sports team is like no other business in the world for a variety of reasons. And we could do a whole show on that.
Yeah.
But it's not the same. First of all, there's way more random luck in it, right? I can say I'm the greatest drafter ever. I was in Tampa for Stamkos and Hedman. There'll be 2 Hall of Fame games, 2 Hall of Fame players potentially right there. That would be incredible for anybody to have on their resume. It's not lost on me, especially as a first pick overall, that there is some luck as to when you're drafting, as to how you actually do. You got to be totally transparent. You want to be any good in life, you got to be able to evaluate your own situation too. Nobody's that smart. I'm not that smart. I do work hard. I do my homework. I am always prepared. I am more balanced than I've ever been. It's a learned skill, process for me. So yeah, those are tough scenarios when you go into an interview and let me tell you, I've had some really, really bad ones by some people that were owners that were similar to that. I'm not going to say who they were. Some of those folks aren't even alive anymore. That's how long I've been in this game. But the reality is that it is a challenge. That doesn't strike me as the way you'd want to go as an organization, though. It just doesn't.
In saying that, Lots, is it safe to say that there's never been more pressure on general managers than there is maybe going into this week with the pandemic, with a flat salary cap, not knowing when we're going to start next year? And then on top of that, you've got some, I think, good hockey people, but inexperienced hockey people like Bill Armstrong in Arizona, like Kevin Adams in Buffalo, like Bill Zito in Florida. How about the pressure on these guys to get it right?
A couple of dynamics and a couple of things to unpack there. First off, in terms of the complexity of the game, it is more complex. There's a lot more things to manage. If you don't have a natural collaborative outlook on life, you're going to suck as a GM in the next 24 to 36 months. And there's some guys out there that they just didn't get into the business that way. It's not the way they do it. I really think they're going to struggle. You've got to be able to build a leadership team, and it has to be real, not on paper. They have responsibility, going to contribute in certain areas. You're going to bounce it off other people. If the hockey operations department ends up being the power of one, you'll never be any good. It's different than when you and I were players, because that is the way it was run. Yeah. When we were players, right. It was one guy making all the decisions, and it was final. The vote was always unanimous, 1-0. That doesn't work in today's world. There's too much complexity, there's too many places to play. What is really unique about right now, you do have 4 basically rookie GMs. And I don't just mean rookie as in their first GM, but you got a guy like Billy Armstrong, really spent the majority of his life as a scout. There's going to be a lot of pressure there. You got Kevin Adams, wasn't even really working in hockey operations, now finds himself in the big chair. That's going to be a lot of pressure. To be fair to Billy Zito, Tom Fitzgerald, who are also new rookie general managers in the league, although Tom was an interim technically, those guys cut their teeth much longer in hockey operations, but it's still not the same. It's not the same until the buck does stop with you. And if you're not used to that responsibility, it can be a challenge to handle. I think right now it's a time where a lot of the other managers are licking their chops, hoping that they can see some mistake that maybe one of these younger guys makes, maybe one inefficiency that they don't recognize. That's not going to happen with all 4 guys. I'm certain of that. But could it happen with one of them? Possibly 2? Absolutely. And you can rest assured those guys will be hunting those potential pathways down hard. That's why I'm so excited to see how it goes over the next just a few weeks, never mind next few months. Add in to all that a salary cap that's supposed to be flat for 3 years, and it's the most chaotic of times that we've seen in the last 50 years of hockey.
I know a lot of teams were interested in Kyper. Bill Armstrong addressed that as well. You think that gets revisited, that he starts, and we know what the long parade is to goaltenders here. I always got at was under the impression the last few days, if not a couple of weeks, Kyper would have been the perfect guy. 2 years left on his deal at 4.5, a very good goaltender. All of a sudden we hear he's not available.
Seems a little strange right out of the box. I would imagine that the toughest thing for a young general manager to do is to jump into the trading market, particularly when you haven't done it, you haven't fielded every call, you may have been in on it, but now you got to go on and speak the words. You got to handle the negotiation with another GM. You got to listen carefully. You got to know the personalities. It just takes a while to do that. The biggest mistake that those guys are prone, in my opinion, to would be wanting too much off the bat. Wanting too much, not recognizing how critical time is as well. Those are the 2 most logical mistakes. I'm not saying any of those guys will make them, but that will be tough. How will that benefit other older managers? Well, one way that'll potentially benefit is that if you're watching and you're maybe competing with one of those players, let's say you had a goaltender and you want to move a goaltender, you probably could count on Darcy Kuemper being priced super aggressively. May give you just enough opening to get your guy in there. These are the nuances of what's going on right now. I'm not saying that's happening. Just saying it's a possibility. You've got to theorize. Whatever your role is, you may be running a different team. It doesn't matter. You've got to be able to look at the business continually where you're theorizing about possibilities if you want to find the best solutions for your organization. It's freaking hard. I do it for a living here at the network because I'm really at NHL Network because I'm the only person I think that's been a GM here right now. We got a ton of super bright people at NHL Network, and I love working there, and I love working with the people I work with. But I spend probably a lot more time than the other guys just thinking about those things, trying to add the content in. All the great fans that are out there listening right now, Kyper, that they don't want us to BS them. That's why people love your show. That's why they love what you do, Kyper, because they know you're you can be perceived as a little harsh, but people know you. People know you're real.
It's a fault. I can't help it, Lots. I can't. I think I get hives if I tell lies.
Well, they know that you always come from a real position, and that's what resonates with people. And quite frankly, that's part of my job here. It's very easy when you're working in the media to talk about how great everything is. Everything's great. This team's great. That team's great. Every team isn't great. I'm sorry, and I don't approach it that way. If someone's not doing well, I'll say it. I try to be respectful because I understand how hard it is. But at the same time, if everything was great and hunky-dory all the time, nobody would watch NHL Network and nobody would listen to you. So it's a very fine line you walk when you're in the media.
From the inexperienced in Florida, Arizona, and Buffalo to the most experienced in Lou Lamoriello with the New York Islanders. He said the other day, Lots, there'll be more players available than people think. So what does that mean, Uncle Lou? No qualifying offers? I think they're going to flood the market. That's what I think with UFAs.
Lamoriello is kind of like E.F. Hutton. You remember the old commercials? Yeah. When they speak, listen closely. Okay. When Lou speaks, listen closely to what he's saying. At 78 years old, and he's probably got another 20 years left of him in this business because he's going to set a record. I've known this guy since I was 14 years old. He's amazing. The guy is amazing. He's not an analytics person, and yet he does well in a league that uses a lot more analytics. There's so many anomalies to Lou that help create this unique blend of a manager, but at the end of the day, highly intelligent, highly intuitive, much friendlier than people give him credit for. There's just a lot of characteristics there to like, and I'm not surprised with the success he's had.
So how do you read, Lots, how do you read what he said in terms of more players available than people think?
Well, unpack it, with the obvious first. Is he talking about his players? Or is he talking about other teams' players? Lou doesn't give up much on his players.
No, he doesn't.
He doesn't give up much on his guys, so I'm going to say he's talking about other teams' players. And I'm going to say that it's not wishful thinking. Lou doesn't like to say things that he knows will be proven wrong. He's smart enough to know that. So I expect exactly what he's saying to come true. He's just putting everybody on notice. There's going to be a lot of players available.
Want to get your thoughts because especially in Toronto, the impression that a lot of people had prior to Lou leaving Toronto was that he wasn't just going to give it away to players like Marner and Matthews. He was prepared to sign them, but he would have kept the number a lot lower than where they ended up. And now he's in a scenario with Barzal. Similar situation that you got to sign him. You think it's going to be an easy signing for Barzal to get $10, $11 million, or will Lou kind of put him through the test?
I think I will run naked down center ice to the Stanley Cup Finals if he gets $11 million next year. How's that sound?
All right. 10.
That's just not going to happen, Kipper.
Nine
I
and
just
a
don't
half.
see it happening. No, just to be fair on Kyle in Toronto. Hey, look, there's a difference in managers. Kyle has a different philosophy with the players than Lou has. Ultimately, everyone's going to be judged on their performance. Kyle is more new age. I think he's, hey, Moneyball, it's a great movie for all the folks out there that want to be a GM. It's not necessarily true that you don't want to know your players and build strong relationships. Nobody has a stronger relationship with their players than Lou Lamoriello. He does, and people wouldn't know that or think that. There's a lot of things under the scenes. Kyle Dubas, on the other hand, pretty warm and friendly with his players, and he expresses that openly, and he's comfortable with it. There's different tacks that everybody uses. Which one is right? Which one is wrong?
Which ones build championships?
Well, yes, Lou has that track record, but keep in mind that Kyle's just starting, and you got to give him time to see how that plays out. There's different ways to do it. There's no doubt about that. Personally, for me, Mitch Marner is very well paid. I used to be an agent. I'll say good for him. He's very well paid. Would Lou Lamoriello have gone that route? I don't think so. So it is what it is. So
we'll keep an eye on it. But before we wrap up, I want to bring it full circle right back to the Tampa Bay Lightning, because there's no time for Julien Brisebois and that staff to sit back and go on boat parades, because everybody's watching them lots. It's almost as if they're supposed to go first here. We know you have guys to sign like Sergachev and Cirelli and Cernak. So let's get going. Let's see what's left over, and we'll pick up the scraps. Is that what's going to happen here?
I've looked at Tampa's cap situation. I would imagine, the process is simple. They're in a terrible spot right now. What does that mean from a grand perspective? It means that you better have a really good friend out there, because you're going to need a favor, because most of the people are going to recognize, the teams you're competing with will rightly recognize you're in a tough spot. You've got some inefficiencies in your roster that you need to correct. You've got some young players coming up for contract that people can offer on. And you could get, in the business world, we call this getting stomped out on a deal. You may not have had enough money to carry a deal through rough times long enough. In the sports world, I call it bad luck, repercussions of a salary cap world. Wouldn't care if I was Julien Brisebois. Of course, he wants to do the best job he is. But when you win, Kipper, it's all freaking worth it. I'm sorry, but that's
and it's the cost. It's the cost of championships, losing a player or two that you might not want.
Yeah. Could they get out of it? Yeah, they can get out of it, Kipper. If you can find someone that would take Tyler Johnson, for instance, that would relieve a lot of pressure. Do I think the other teams are going to help out? Not unless there's something really great for them.
But it's going to take an owner with deep pockets to say that I'll spend $2 million, $3 million, $4 million on a prospect or a first round pick. And I get the sense from the Mark Stahl deal in Detroit that they could be a team that could maybe do Tampa Bay a little bit of a favor, especially the relationship with Steve Yzerman. They could benefit being the Lightning's friend here.
Yeah, well, start with the obvious, Kipper. There's only so many teams in their current composition that can do it now. Detroit, Buffalo, New Jersey, Ottawa, just off the top of my head, Montreal. They all have significant cap space and would be potential suitors. That doesn't mean they're going to. They're trying to get better too. Some of them, they may have their own internal mandates where they're just not going to spend the money, so they're out. We could maybe say Ottawa. Maybe Ottawa just, they're going to spend as little as they can until they're ready to pop up and be a dominant team. I wouldn't begrudge them for that. That's their right. But Detroit, Stevie knows that, and Stevie and I have talked, and every situation is different that you take over. What happened for Stevie in Tampa is not going to happen in Detroit on the same timeline. Completely different teams. completely different good and bad items to deal with. That's going to take some time, in my opinion. I just, like everybody else listening, really, Steve will do a wonderful job. It's going to take a little more time. Is he going to use this as an avenue to bail out the Tampa Bay Lightning because he used to work there? No, I don't think he'll do that for a second because of the connection. He might do it because it'll benefit the Detroit Red Wings. So a lot of things could happen. There's a lot of teams that have designs on, boy, that Mikhail Sergachev, he really looked good playing for us. Or, boy, that Anthony Cirelli's a wonderful player. He'd look great in our lineup. It's going to be another thing to make that come to fruition. But we're going to find out really quickly here because things are going to start happening, and I can't wait to see how that unfolds.
You'd be a good guy to ask this question in the next 48 hours or the next few months. Would the league have to watch a little extra careful on circumvention? And if you're a general manager, do you push the envelope until someone tells you otherwise?
People are always trying to push the envelope, and the National Hockey League is always watching. This year in particular, with what happened in Arizona on something that wasn't cap circumvention, but was not permissible by the rules, was incredibly harshly dealt with. Penalties to Arizona were much steeper than I imagined they would be. I think that's a pretty strong message to GMs. And now it's been turned up, Kyper. It's not just that we'll fine your team and take away draft picks. The message is, because I've talked to a lot of guys on how they interpret that, the message is if you cheat, you will lose your job and probably never be back.
Well, and
that's as harsh as it gets for anybody that's thinking about circumvention. And I think the National Hockey League is probably pretty happy knowing that.
And until
that, because that's the way we feel.
Until John Chayka gets another job, he might be the example right now. Lots.
Yeah, I mean, I'm drawing a lot of assumptions there that I don't know are 100% true, to be fair. But I do know that he's not running the Arizona Coyotes anymore for whatever reason. The reason publicly is that he left the team. Okay, I'm not sure the other general managers. I'm positive the other general managers I spoke to did not interpret that way.
Yes. Yeah. Well, the message was clear. Don't embarrass us.
Right.
Hey, great insight today, Lots. All your stuff on Tampa Bay, and thank you for being candid with that whole Vinny LeCavalier scenario. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah, Vinny's a great guy. Yeah, Vinny's a great guy. He had an incredible career. I hope he gets in the Hall of Fame one day. Stanley Cup champion. He did so much. Art Ross, you name it. The guy did it. It just, you got to make tough decisions when you're running teams. That's the bottom line. All these managers, they have an incredibly difficult job.
Lots throughout the playoffs. Thanks for stepping in and being a regular voice here. It's great. Going to lean on you a little bit more with free agency and, of course, the draft coming as early as Tuesday and Wednesday. But so appreciate your insight and all your experiences through hockey, because it's made the show so much better than what Doug McLean usually adds. I'm just kidding, Mac. I know Mac's watching.
I love Mac. He does an awesome
too.
In all seriousness, I'd like to tease him, but Doug McLean has got a ton of experiences in this.
As far as you, Doug, Darren Pang, and a lot of the guests that we've had, we're very fortunate here to have such a deep Rolodex of experience, Lots, and we certainly appreciate.
Alan May, bro, you leaving Alan out of the convo.
Well, Alan's, Alan's a player, and I'm a player, and these guys are executives. They've run teams. But I would never leave Alan May out of there, Jordan, for sure.
Just messing with you, brother.
Just messing with me. One last thought on on the show before we let everyone go. Tomorrow, Jordan, is the big day, right? For the Harley.
Absolutely. We'll be giving that Harley away tomorrow around 12:45 Eastern time, towards the end of the show tomorrow. Spoke with Blitzblet this morning, have all the finalists ready to go. They've been notified. They should be joining us tomorrow as well. I'm really excited. I think it's going to be great to be able to give someone this sort of gift, whether they want to ride it or just take selfies in front of it. Either really works for me, to be honest.
Lots, you a biker?
Never been. Hey, look, I love motorcycles. I've been to Sturgis a number of times, not for the big event there, but no, I'm not a rider of motorcycles.
You know, the other guy that we didn't mention is Darren Pang, an amazing contributor here on the Real Kyper at Noon Show. Doug McLean ruled Darren Pang ineligible to win the Harley Davidson because his toes don't reach the ground at the stop sign.
Nobody would take that better than Panger. He's an awesome guy.
Brian Lawton, everybody, from the NHL Network on the Real Kyper at Noon Show. Thanks for doing this, Lots.
Appreciate it, Kyper, anytime.
All right. Wasn't that great? Having that type of knowledge and wealth of experience in our show was great. It's going to be interesting to watch the Jack Eichel situation. And as we said yesterday, as I said yesterday, I don't expect him traded anytime soon, but I don't think the rumblings will go away either. So we'll keep an eye on that and so much more as we head into Tuesday's NHL Draft. Will the Rangers keep their first pick overall? In all probability, yes, but we know they're looking for a centerman as well. So much more going into next week, and we're going to be sticking around, and we'll be back to tell you all about it. When we get the news, we'll put it out on the Real Kyper at Noon show for all of you. So once again, thanks for joining us. Full-time or first-time listeners, please subscribe. We love having you on a daily basis and looking forward to so much more. Have a great day, and we'll see you tomorrow with Doug McLean